This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
Thanks for tuning in to Power Athlete Radio. This week, we host Chris Kelly of Nourish Balance Thrive. When Chris isn't busy training as a professional mountain biker, you can find him assisting clients and athletes worldwide through diet modification and personalized biofeedback tests. At Nourish Balance Thrive, Chris seeks to identify what's making you feel ill, tired, or imbalanced through a variety of diagnostics. In this episode, you'll hear how Chris came to become so passionate about the impact of nutrition optimization. He struggled for years to adjust to a Western diet and sedentary job before giving it up to embrace his love of sport and science. What does a healthy morning sex drive and testosterone have in common? As Chris explains, just about everything. Also, here's some of the results his clients have experienced, all by way of fine-tuning their diet after testing with Nourish Balance Thrive. Morning, noon, or night, Power Athlete Radio is your source of high arousal. This is episode 131.
What's happening, Power Athlete Nation? What's up? Are you ready for some knowledge bombs? I know that phrase is kind of thrown around there a lot these days, but you know it's the real shit when it's coming from Power Athlete HQ. I mean, first we get Dr. Ford on, and then we go right into Tate Fletcher. I hope you guys have listened to the Tate Fletcher interview, but, I mean, we got all kinds of knowledge bombs coming at you. Today, we got Chris Kelly from Nourish Balance Thrive, right? That's a company they're doing some pretty interesting testing. Chris hails from England. He graduated in 2000 from Southampton University. He's the CFO of Nourish Balance Thrive. And Chris, thanks for taking the time to join us on the show today.
It's a privilege. Thank you very much for having me. It seems like it's an impossible act to follow, right? Just with the recent guests you've had on. It's good. I'm not really sure I'm going to really add to that, but I'll do my best.
And we got Luke and Tex from Power Athlete HQ. How you guys doing?
What's up? Oh. You know, Denny, you bring up a good point, and I know this we usually save the bullshit for the end, but, like, Tex, how long have we been using knowledge bombs?
Since the dawn of time.
I believe it was on the other side of the stone tablet of Moses, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's, the 11th commandment that's lost.
Hey, knowledge bombs and selfie sticks. I mean, I'm going to call it that was started right here.
And like, now you look at a hashtag knowledge bomb on the old Instagram, there's a bunch of people putting out maybe knowledge firecrackers, maybe. But you just can't call anything a knowledge bomb. And going through Chris's site, man, there's a lot of cool stuff that a lot of people haven't heard of that we're going to be talking about today. So,
are you saying that we have to come up with a new hashtag today for this podcast?
Maybe.
I think we should. Hashtag we don't fuck around.
I like it, but I don't know if it's user friendly.
Everything's user friendly. We can start this. We can set the standard.
Well, without further ado, Danny, let's get Chris going.
Chris, why don't you just kind of start the show off? Well, we already started the show, right? But maybe we can just kind of let the listeners know a little bit about you and your background and what you're currently doing.
Sure. So before I go any further, I should probably make it clear that I'm not a doctor or any kind of medical professional. What I do is mostly self-taught, actually. I'm a kind of a geeky, nerdy guy. I've got an undergraduate degree in computer science and also one in electronics. And as you can tell from my voice, I'm British. And I graduated in 2000, which, as you can probably remember, was a pretty exciting time to be in tech, and people were offering me jobs before I even left university, and that was pretty cool. And one of the people that offered me a job was Yahoo, who, of course, you've heard of. And eventually they brought me over to the US, and I thought, wow, this is awesome. I'm going to live in Sunnyvale in California, and it's all sunny and nice, and I can ride my bike and kiteboard and snowboard and it's a new beginning, everything's fantastic. And in the beginning, it was really great. And I was working in a little grey cubicle that I wasn't impressed with. There was a lot of things that were a real culture shock to me when I first came over here to America. And the grey cube was one of those things, and fluorescent lights and metal boxes and cafeteria food and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't really understand any of it. And I just kind of got into it as best I could, started eating the cafeteria food, and the wheels came off the wagon pretty quick. I put on a lot of weight. I started to get brain fog, a lot of bloating, wasn't sleeping very well. In theory, a single guy living in San Francisco, there's not many straight guys in San Francisco, so it should have been like, happy days in terms of dating, but my sex drive and testosterone was just totally in the toilet, and there was really nothing happening on the dating scene. And eventually I figured some stuff out with the food and discovered the paleo diet, and really that was kind of driven by perhaps not the right motive. I'm a mountain biker, and I started training pretty heavily once I moved to the US, and I was doing pretty good. I was winning some races and looking to move up and almost looking for ways to improve my performance. And I saw the paleo diet as one way that I might be able to do that. And it was great. And a lot of my symptoms improved, my digestion improved, started to think more clearly, started to sleep a bit better. But it really didn't give me everything I was looking for. And, but it's kind of sparked the interest. I'm like, okay, so if it is possible for me to make some improvement by myself, like what else is possible? And I went to the doctor. Like, if you're not feeling good, that's the first thing you do, right? You go to the doctor. And I was just astounded by how useless he was, just utterly useless. Really said, there's nothing wrong with you. Come back in 10 years' time when something is wrong, and then maybe I can help you. And at the same time, he said, oh, well, if you've got GI complaints, I can send you to a gastroenterologist. And the gastroenterologist just looked at me and said, yeah, no, there's probably nothing too much wrong with you. It's nothing to do with anything you're eating. We can give you a colonoscopy or an endoscopy, and if we see anything bad, we can maybe do some surgery or give you some steroids, see if that helps. I'm thinking, no, this is not right. There's got to be more to it than this. And kind of that's what led me into the whole functional medicine thing. So I just spend all of my time now just geeking out over the types of tests that you can do to find out what's going on inside your body. And of course, I didn't do this all myself to begin with. I found a functional medicine practitioner that helped me, and just the results were so amazing. I just had to know how it worked. And so, that's what I've been doing. I've been doing training courses. I've partnered with two medical doctors. One of the medical doctors is also a pro mountain biker. I've been able to upgrade to pro now, so we're both pros. And there's another medical doctor who is a PhD fellow in Oslo in Norway. And that's what we do. We now test athletes in the same way that I tested myself a couple of years ago. And we've been finding the same sorts of problems in all the athletes that we test. And if they follow the same protocols, they get exactly the same results. And it's been fantastic. I've given up my job a couple of years ago. I was working at a hedge fund, and I've now given that work up. And this is what I do full time. And I'm just super excited about it and really having a good time helping people.
So, Chris, can you talk a little bit about that journey, I guess, getting the disappointing feedback from the medical docs? What was your first, second, third step into the functional medicine world? And what were some of the experiences that totally, I guess it veered your path more towards that as a reliable source versus the medical world?
Yeah, I guess I was kind of pulled up by my bootstraps in a way, if that makes any sense. Kind of a computer nerdy term, to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? So you're kind of there in a haze of brain fog, and you've got somebody that's saying something to you, and you kind of have an inkling that what they're saying doesn't make sense, but you're not really thinking clearly enough to be able to make a good decision. And I just got lucky, I guess. I was still dating, but none of those relationships were really going anywhere. And the girl I was seeing at the time is now my wife, and she is a food scientist. She had recently completed a master's degree in food science and had refused to go into practice as a dietitian or a nutritionist just because she believed that what she would have to practice wouldn't help people. And I think she was bang on. And so, when the gastroenterologist and the doctor was saying, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you, she was saying, no, that's bollocks. And she did her own research. And so she found the autoimmune protocol, which is kind of a stricter subset of the paleo diet, right? So no sugar, no grains, but then you would exclude a few more things. And that really helped me. And it was kind of, that was the beginning of the end for the conventional establishment, right? I kind of knew at that point that they were no good. And I don't want to like take anything away from, you know, some doctors, because I've benefited greatly from people that fix broken bones, right? I've like on my mountain bike, I crash all the time, and they screw in titanium plates and all that good stuff, and it's amazing what they can do. But yeah, if you go to a doctor and just complain that you're tired, you know, you're not going to have a good experience.
Welcome to the United States of medicine, of doctors, right? Like nobody wants to do anything because you're afraid you're going to get sued.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I've thought about this a lot. I spend a lot of time still thinking about it now. And you know, Tommy, one of the doctors, he is a British medical doctor, and he has been in practice in the UK. And he said, if anything, the situation is worse. So in the UK, there's the National Health Service. So your tax dollars actually pay for something, right? You get the health service. And so if something really bad happens to you, then you're covered, you're fine. But otherwise, it's kind of the same situation. You know, you go in and you see a GP, that's a sort of general practitioner that stands for, and you never see the same guy twice, or woman, and they've got 7 minutes in order to solve your problem, and the only tool they really have is the prescription pad, and so you're leaving with a prescription, right? There's no other option, and obviously we know that prescriptions don't always work that well for certain problems.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned that you found the paleo diet. I'm curious, did you try like any kind of ketogenic diet?
No, I only discovered that much later on. I find that this is a path, like the path for men. Like if you're listening to this, so I'm up to 498. I counted yesterday, 498 athletes that we've tested so far. And for some reason, the guys around about my age, so I'm late 30s, just about to turn 40, a bunch of them all have like GI complaints, a lot of fatigue, a lot of brain fog, a lot of insomnia, a lot of low sex drive, and they've got a bunch of issues going on that they need to do some testing, figure out what's going on. And then once they fix those problems, right, so you get rid of your H. pylori infection, get rid of your Giardia, I do a follow-up with them, say 2 or 3 months later, and they've discovered the ketogenic diet, and suddenly they were like, okay, when I got rid of the Giardia, I felt really good, but when I went into ketosis, that was like the silver bullet. Like now I feel amazing and I want to just tell everyone about it. And it seems like there's something going on here. I need to figure out what's going on because all the men take this path.
Chris, could you go into some of the details from some of the tests you're putting these 400 some odd athletes through?
Sure. So there's really not that many tests actually. So I look at salivary hormones. So there's a 4-point cortisol test. So I'm sure that cortisol's come up in the podcast many times. And I think it's the most important hormone, right? If you're under stress, that's going to change everything. People always talk about insulin and maybe growth hormone or something else, but I still think that cortisol is the most important hormone because, you know, if a tiger is chasing you, then nothing else is going to happen apart from liquidizing your assets and getting away, right? So this hormone cortisol, I think, is really important. And so we measure that. And the interesting thing is I never see high cortisol, never. Like you always think that people are going to be stressed out, they're going to have high cortisol. Maybe that's why they can't sleep. I never see that. The cortisol was always low. And low cortisol, that's what I found in my own result too. It feels like death. It's kind of mild depression. I don't really want to get out of bed in the morning. Don't look forward to training anymore. That kind of, it's just not a good feeling. So always low cortisol. And then I see low DHEA. DHEA is an anabolic precursor to a bunch of different sex hormones, including testosterone. And then in the men, I always see low testosterone. In the women, it's low progesterone and estrogen. And that, I think, is just kind of the starting place for the testing. You know, a lot of people, they do this 4-point cortisol test, and they think, well, that's it. I've got adrenal fatigue. This is my answer. And it kind of is. Like, it tells you that something's going on. But really, I think of that as the beginning of the investigation. And so I do blood chemistry, which is something probably everybody's already done, right? Just a CBC, a complete blood cell count, and a comprehensive wellness profile. So that's just a bunch of markers you'll see on any blood test. And then I look at urinary organic acids. So this is a urine test that you do at home, and organic acids are awesome. It like gives you this incredible window into the inside workings of your body and biochemistry. And then I also do a lot of stool testing. So especially the people with GI complaints, that's a total no-brainer. Like you should test to make sure that you don't have some kind of parasite or bacterial overgrowth or something going on in your gut, because that could totally be the source of all of these problems. And really, that's about it. That's what I do. There's kind of like 3 or 4 different types of tests in most people.
What hormone? You talked about what's always registering low, and I wish we had Playtech on here, one of our other hosts, because he wrote an article, I want to say a few months ago, where it was like cortisol's a good thing, right? Like everybody, like you said, when stress levels are high, we're always like, oh, we got high cortisol, we got to bring those levels down, and negative, but you really don't hear a whole lot about like the good things that cortisol do. But
yeah, absolutely.
I was curious, are there, if those other hormones are registered low, what are you seeing that's registered real high?
Almost nothing. Across the board with hormones in both men and women, they're nearly always low. The possible exception is I see quite a lot of women who have normal levels of testosterone. So say their testosterone ideally would be 50 points. So they have normal testosterone and then very low levels of estrogen and progesterone. And so that's a relative testosterone dominance. And those people, they tend to be killer athletes, actually. Like all of the pro mountain bikers that I test, they're always like this. They're just freaking killer women that you just can't believe it's a girl, right? Like if there wasn't a ponytail and you were riding behind them, you'd never believe it. And they're testosterone dominant, and they tend to suffer from problems like blood sugar imbalance, like they're slightly insulin resistant, and maybe some like a lot of skin stuff like acne, maybe some rogue hairs and weirdness. And this is kind of, it's really bad news for these women if they ever want to try and get pregnant, because PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, that's probably caused by androgen dominance and insulin resistance, it's the leading cause of infertility. So it's really not something that they want to live with. It's better to sort that thing out. But yeah, for the men, it's just kind of, it's almost universally low, like low testosterone, low DHEA, low cortisol.
And if it's kind of a universal result, have you been able to pinpoint what are the behavioral traits that these guys are performing on a daily basis? Is it lack of sleep? Are they working too much? Are they in too much artificial light? Are they drinking too much food, processed foods and drinks and stuff like that?
Well, by the time they talk to me, I think the answer is no. So, I have my own podcast, and I talk about a lot of the things that you just mentioned myself, and people have already heard that stuff, and those are the first thing they try, right? They try eliminating wheat and dairy, and they find out about light at night, and they clean up their bedroom environment, and maybe they get rid of some plastic out of their life, stop heating coffee in microwave containers and all this kind of stuff. And they're still not feeling better. So that seems like a good time to me to like do some testing and try and figure out why you're doing everything right and still not getting good results.
So we're talking a lot about problems here, and is there a difference between your solutions between men and women athletes?
Yeah, so it really depends on the finding of the tests, right? So, I say that all the saliva panels come back the same, but the reason why might be different, right? So let me just I'll present 2 different reasons. So, let's say you had some kind of infection, you had a Giardia infection in your gut, and one of the things that cortisol does is it modulates inflammation, right? So cortisol's anti-inflammatory, and you know this because if you've ever had poison oak on your leg, which is something that happens to me all the time here as a mountain biker in Santa Cruz, it creates this inflammatory rash thing on your leg, and you can rub prednisone or hydrocortisone or some sort of synthetic form of cortisol into that, and it reduces the inflammation and it stops the itching and the swelling and all the rest of that stuff. Well, the same thing happens inside your body with cortisol, and if you've got an infection, like this is not something that's controlled by you consciously, obviously, your body just says, okay, let's just like turn down the cortisol all the way in an attempt to increase inflammation and get rid of that infection, and it doesn't like normally work. Like with some infections, it doesn't get rid of the infection, and so it becomes something chronic. And then there's another situation which I see a lot of, which is there's something wrong. So people always talk about adrenal fatigue, and as if there's something wrong with the actual adrenal glands themselves. And I'm sure that can happen, but I don't think it's what's happening in the athletes that I test. I think what's more likely, if it's not the infection thing, then the cells inside of the adrenal gland, so that somewhere inside your body there's these cells that are making this steroid hormone, right? And if those cells don't have what they need in order to do what those cells do, then they just don't make the hormone, right? They don't make the testosterone, they don't make the cortisol, they don't make whatever hormone that it is. And so sometimes I'll see someone who is anemic, right? So they're unable to deliver oxygen to these special cells that make the low cortisol, that make the cortisol, and so they end up with low cortisol. But they also have a bunch of other symptoms, because it's not those cells that don't have enough oxygen. Those are not the only cells that don't have enough oxygen. It's all of them, right? So they just feel really tired and crappy.
So then, can you walk us through the testing process? I guess let's say an athlete of ours who's listening right now is like, this NBT thing is what I'm looking for. So what happens next?
Sure. So usually what happens is people place an order online for the test kits. And most of the tests you can do at home. So, I talked about the saliva hormone testing. You can do that at home. Urinary organic acids, again, it's just a sample of urine that you collect first thing in the morning. You freeze that, send it into the lab. The stool is the same. Not much fun to collect some poo, but it can be worth it if you find a cryptosporidium infection, right? You kind of want to deal with that and get rid of it. And the blood testing is a little bit more complex. You do need to go to the lab and have blood drawn. But you don't need to see a doctor. If you order the test through me, I can just send you the PDF requisition form. So the disadvantage is you're going to be paying out of pocket, right? You just pay cash. But the advantage is you don't need to go to a doctor, and you know exactly what you're going to pay, right? So when I've done a ton of blood work in the past, it's like playing the lottery. You might, the billing statement comes back from the insurance company. They might cover everything. They might cover nothing. You think you're going to pay $100 for a standard blood chemistry. You end up paying $1,000. It's like kind of, really tricky. So that's the process. It takes a while to get all the tests done. Most people take a couple of weeks over it. But I've got people that I work with. I've got my wonderful registered nurse, Amelia, who's also done all the same training as me, and she's really good at walking people through the process.
Yeah, she's the one that she emailed us, giving us the heads up on what you guys were doing. So we're talking about like testing athletes. Do you have any experience in testing like children or teenagers, and just kind of, getting a feel for like how to improve their performance or anything like that?
I haven't tested that many kids. I've tested a couple, but not many. I don't think it's worth testing hormones in kids. That's kind of a waste of your money. Mm-hmm. But the organic acids are pretty awesome for that, right? So if you've got someone, so I've had a relative, a close family friend that's had a lot of GI symptoms, and you run an organic acids test on a kid, and it's really common to find bacterial overgrowth. So that's one of the cool things that the organic acids test can do. It doesn't look at the bacteria in your gut directly. That's quite difficult to do. But what it can do is measure some of the things that the bacteria in your gut would produce, these metabolites they're called. So certain species of bacteria and also yeast, there's a yeast called Candida that produces something called diarabinitol, and that's something you can measure in a urine sample. So it's a surrogate marker, it's like a proxy, you might call it. And you collect a sample of urine, send it into the lab, and they can tell you, if there's bacterial overgrowth, and that's super common in kids with GI symptoms. I see that quite a lot. Anecdotally, but not much in my practice.
I mean, we always talk about like how the gut's the window to the immune system, and we had a guest on a few weeks ago, Dr. Kenneth Ford, who's, like John says, pretty much the smartest guy in the world, right? He was really getting into like ketogenic diets and the benefits of, like we kind of got in this conversation about the NFL athletes and TBIs, and then it went into soldiers out in the field. And then a girl happened to walk into the gym a few hours after that conversation, and she's kind of, at the gym that I'm at, she's more of the competitive CrossFitter, and she's like telling me all of these like food allergies that she has, and it was like she was allergic to everything, every single thing. And I was like, man, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And the prescriptions that she is on are like a lot of probiotics and stuff like that. But I wish I could like find something for her to, that she can kind of, help her, and she can get some good quality nourishment, because I mean she looks great when she performs, but like you can see it in her face that she's just like drained,
Hmm.
just like lack of energy. Like when I start looking at some of these symptoms that in on your website you talk about, like gas, diarrhea, painful bloating, poor cognition. You were calling it like brain fog and mild
Yeah.
depression, like all these things. I mean, for one thing, that seems like me on every Sunday morning. But
Is
for
that
another,
beer
I mean,
induced though?
that's yeah, right. For another though, that's I see that in her, and it seems like there's everything's just kind of like, here's a good probiotic for you. And I don't know, maybe I should like have her, send some tests over to you and see what if you guys can help her out or not.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to get checked out to make sure that you don't have any infections. And the weird thing is about this stuff is the regular doctors, so primary care physicians or GPs as we call them in the UK, are just not looking for this stuff, but they will treat it if you find something. So something that happens all the time, we'll do this stool antigen test, and the results will come back positive for a bacteria called H. pylori. And H. pylori is a very famous bacteria. It's some scientist called Barry Marshall won the Nobel Prize for showing that it was a causal factor in stomach ulcers, which left untreated can become cancer. And he cured himself of these ulcers by taking antibiotics. And so it's very well known within the medical establishment, the community, that treating this bacteria, H. pylori, is a good idea. But none of the doctors, like if you come in and you say, I've got a lot of bloating, a lot of heartburn, I'm burping, I'm tired, I can't think clearly, they're probably not going to test you for H. pylori. And even if they do, they're going to use a blood test, which is notoriously unreliable. And what you really need is the stool antigen test. But then so let's say you did the test with me and you found out that you had this bacteria, H. pylori, and then you went back to your doctor and said, hey, look at this, I've got this bacteria. They say, oh, look at that, so you do. And they'll prescribe you like 3 types of antibiotics to get rid of it. And I've seen that work well, as well as some botanical herbs. But yeah, it's just strange to me that the doctors are not really thinking to screen for this stuff, because I know for sure it can be a problem. And I think it's something you've got to think about. Like so for your girl, if she's cut out all of the things that we know can be problematic, so like wheat and dairy, and maybe she's eliminated nuts and eggs and seeds and nightshades, and she's
Yeah.
still got a lot of like gas and diarrhea and problems like that,
Yeah.
then you've really got to start asking yourself then, okay, so we've eliminated all of the likely suspects. Is something else going on here? And I think it probably is, because just the results that I've seen, like more than half of them have some kind of infection on, and people always feel better when they get rid of the infection. So I think it's a test worth doing.
Yeah, the way she describes it is like things work well for a while when she makes these specific changes, and then it's almost like her body kind of adapts to it and it goes right back down the shitter, literally.
Yeah.
And she also mentioned like she took a trip to Venezuela maybe a month ago because she's a school teacher, and like didn't have any kind of issue, right? It was almost like she was saying the quality of the food was so much better. I don't know.
Yeah,
Right.
I think about that too, it's an interesting hypothesis, isn't it? That,
Yeah.
I wasn't great as a kid. I definitely had some GI issues. I do remember shitting my pants as a kid, but it wasn't that bad, until I got to the US, and then it was like, it ended me in a very short period, within 5 years, I was just completely a wreck of a human being. So I think there is like something special going on about either the American food or maybe something else in the environment. I'm not really sure.
Chris, I want to switch gears back to athlete. I work with a lot of college athletes, and then I often get this question once their season is over.
Hmm.
And I just picked up on your article about transitioning into the off season. So could we talk about some of the signs that you as a coach should be looking for in terms of energy, interest, training into your athletes as they transition into the off season?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the thing I always look for, sometimes it's easiest to talk about what I look for in myself, just because I can describe those feelings so much better. And at the moment, so I'm a mountain biker, and at the moment I'm racing cyclocross, and that's kind of a weird thing that cyclists do in the winter. It's like short track mountain bike racing on bikes which look like a road bike. It's a really weird thing. It involves running and all kinds of weird stuff, very high intensity. But I'll be done with that soon, and so I'll be moving into an off season. And for me, like the main thing, the main sign that you're ready is you start getting really bored and really jonesing for exercise. So all these people that I've been testing and I've been talking about up until now with low cortisol and what many people would call adrenal fatigue, they're not looking forward to training at all. Like they'll do it just because they're type A people that are very motivated and disciplined, but they're really not looking forward to it in the way that they're used to. That's a clear sign. So when you start feeling that, I'm really looking forward to going out and running or swimming or lifting or biking, whatever it is you do, I think that's a really clear sign. And then the men have the most fantastic barometer in morning glory, right? So you should, especially the younger, like if you've got college age boys, they should be dreaming about sex all day long, all night long, waking up with a boner. And if that's not happening, that's a clear sign for me that something's really not going according to plan. That's almost as sensitive as doing a testosterone test as far as I'm concerned, that one little qualitative measure.
Never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Right? So all those years,
definitely,
yeah, I was on the right path.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can save yourself $400 on a test. You just need to pay attention when you wake up.
Yeah, I'm sure morning glory is definitely a deep topic here. But sticking with the college athlete in that article, you talked about some hidden signs or causes for fatigue that a coach should be looking for. And so I know at the college level, you also have the stress of class. You got the stress of chicks, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it is. So could you talk about some of the things that coaches should look for, like the hidden signs of fatigue and stress?
Some of the hidden things. Yeah, so maybe I'm not the best person to answer this question because I'm such a testing guy, that's my thing. Like I don't like to. So here's the thing about symptoms, right? They're all the same. Like I've done, as well as testing 498 athletes, I've do these free consultations, which I still do, and I must have talked to well over 1,000 people here, and they all tell me exactly the same symptoms. Everybody's tired. Everybody's unable to sleep, even though they're so tired during the day. Everybody can't make it more than 4 hours without food. Everybody's sex drive is gone. Nobody looks forward to exercise anymore. That's kind of the constellation of signs and symptoms. And so to ask people, or tell me about that, do you have this thing? And they say yes. It's almost like you haven't got any additional information. Do you know what I mean? So you can't really, I don't think you can really guess as a coach. Like you just have to do the test. And the technology is here. We don't have to guess. We can do the test. Although it's quite expensive. Some of the data you might already have in the blood chemistry.
Chris, I think we'd make a good team in terms of testing and then coaching, because a lot of the things that I've been learning throughout the years is empathy and then connection with athletes. So it'd be a good thing to kind of test a coach's skill or test a coach's empathy and connection with their athlete, kind of feeling what they're feeling by adding in those tests. So definitely that energy almost in the warm up or like that 2-3 minutes before you got to make them take the warm up lap or whatever. That's definitely almost the telltale sign of how your training is going and how they're feeling. Pairing lifting with practice and so on and so forth. So these things that you're talking about that you're seeing in the test, they definitely exist outside of that.
Yeah, and I mean there are some questions I should add that I get everybody to do a health assessment questionnaire, and these aren't questions I just pulled out of a hat. They came from an NIH project, and some of them are extremely poignant. Like when you ask someone, I experienced extreme exhaustion, I ran out of energy, my fatigue limited me at work, I was too tired to think clearly, I was too tired to exercise strenuously. So there's a bunch of questions I ask people that help me track progress, but it doesn't really help me diagnose anything. It doesn't really tell me where the problem is.
Yeah, and much like cycling, it's a set competition date. Any sport, either high school, college, or pro, it's a set date, and no matter how you're feeling, you still have to compete to the best of your abilities. So kind of with that stress, is there any different approach to kind of prescription, or do you recommend testing this stuff during season for different athletes?
Yeah, I mean, most of the people I work with are masters athletes, and they're just done with it. In fact, some people that come to me, they've got to the point where they can't train at all anymore. Like they know if they get their heart rate up above a certain level, they're not going to be able to get out of bed the next day. So that's pretty bad. But at the same time, I think the off season is a unique opportunity because you can try something new without affecting your performance, right? So let's say there's something in this paleo diet thing, and maybe in the first couple of weeks you might be a bit confused about what it is that you should be eating, and you're going to make some mistakes, and maybe you're going to not eat enough food, and maybe you're going to lose some weight and a little bit of muscle, and maybe that's not going to be great for your performance in the short term, but it is going to yield some advantage in the long term. So yeah, you'd want to do that in the off season where it's not going to affect your results.
Well, Chris, in terms of an athlete, let's say, who's experiencing some of these mental components, whether it's approaching training or even just losing that competitive drive, and let's say that they start to mask this stuff with, pre-workout coffee chugs, face buzz extreme 2000. I mean, what risks are they looking to run into, whether or not it's an adrenal issue or perhaps some sort of infection where they just kind of supplement themselves out of that deficit?
Yeah, so so one of the things that stress does, or one of the things that cortisol does, is it defers long-term building projects. So, I talked about a tiger earlier, and I think that's a really great analogy, and it's actually not mine. There's a really talented guy called Robert Sapolsky who has a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and he talks about this in some depth, but it's kind of easy to explain. Imagine you're a zebra running across the African savannah, lion jumps out from behind a bush, zebra runs for its life, hopefully survives the day, doesn't happen again, maybe ever, for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, whatever. But for that moment when the zebra is running for its life, it wants to just put all long-term building projects on hold, right? Everything, like including digestion, because you think even digestion is a long-term building project. If you're about to be eaten by a tiger, then what's the point in trying to digest food? You just want to liquidate your assets and just create as much energy as you possibly can and run for your life. And of course, if you're run down and you're stressed out and you've got an infection and maybe some other nutrient deficiency that's acting like a stress on your body, then masking over that with the symptoms so that you can keep going and not dealing with that, you're just constantly putting those long-term building projects on hold, and then eventually you're just going to come undone, right? You're just going to end up, you'll get the flu and you just won't be able to get out of bed one day until you start to address it.
Yeah, that's it. Go ahead, Denny.
I kind of wanted to go back to the whole cortisol thing, because I mean that's something that I'm not well versed in as far as like the benefits of it, and we're kind of going down this path of people feeling this like drawn out, just beat down, like no enthusiasm or will to train and all that kind of stuff, when like and I just work with like kind of the general pop more than higher level athletes. That's one of the first things I'll kind of go to is just I'll ask them about their personal life a little bit, like what's it like at home, are you stressed out and stuff like that, and I'll always kind of go to this, have you gotten your cortisol level checked, because say 80% of these conversations will be something, these people, their ultimate goal is to kind of look good naked, to lose some weight. I feel like I'm doing these things right, I can't shed these extra pounds, and from what I know of like cortisol, if it's all jacked up, like you're going to retain some of that weight. So I kind of present it to them more of a negative thing, right? And I'm kind of interested in more of like the benefits of that. What are the benefits of cortisol?
Well, yeah, it's a catabolic hormone that breaks things down and mobilizes energy, right? So in the right time and place. So, on Sunday, I'm going to be in a cyclocross race, and when the gun goes off, I want some cortisol, right? That's a good thing. I need that cortisol to mobilize energy. That's going to that's going to start making me break down fat and maybe a little bit of protein and glycogen, and I'm going to use all those things as energy to get me through that bike race. And of course, it's all completely artificially induced stress. But yeah, at that point, cortisol is going to serve a very useful purpose for me. And you know, the same thing, that stress response is designed to save my life, and I'm abusing it a little bit. But yeah, if I were unable to produce that cortisol, then just nothing would happen. And I have actually experienced that. You know, the gun would go off at the start of a bike race, and I'd be just off on my merry way, like I was, you know, on my way to work or something. And it's funny that you should say that, actually, about trying to paper over that with stimulants and whatnot, because I got to the point where I'd take, you know, 2 grams of caffeine in capsule form before the start of a bike race to try and get myself going, and it sort of worked, but I was unable to sleep for about 2 days afterwards. So it was like there's too much of a downside. Yeah, and then I think, you know, another way that you can track this stuff, if you're worried about it, if you're worried that you are overtraining, is heart rate variability. So that's what I get everybody to do now, is to put on a heart rate monitor strap and then just test the heart rate variability. I'm not sure if that's something you've talked about on the podcast before, and I'm seeing a wonderful correlation between, you know, the readiness to train and how healthy a person is and their HRV score.
That's, you know what, I trained a guy who was, like, they do the firefighters challenge. They actually went to the Worlds and won it, but that had nothing to do with what I was doing with him, right? Like, I only got to work with him for a little bit, but he was really big on his heart rate monitor, right? He kept looking at it, and I'm like, you know, where you at? And he's like, oh, I'm at, like, you know, 160, so I need to keep doing this in order to, you know, because I perform better at this certain level. And he was like really just into like the exactness of what that monitor was telling him and totally gauging his performance on that number.
Right. Yeah, no, this is something different. So I do that too. I'm kind of nerdy like that too. I like to wear a heart rate monitor whilst I ride my bike. But no, this is, you know, so first thing in the morning, you put on that same heart rate monitor, the same gadget, and you pair it with your phone, and there's an app you can get called Elite HRV, is the one that I like the best. And so you sit there and you just kind of breathe quietly for a couple of minutes, and what the app is doing, it's measuring the distance in between heartbeats, right? So your heart, it doesn't beat like a metronome. It's not just going dum 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 like someone playing the drums. It's like all the different spaces in between the beats are different. And the greater the variability, so the greater the difference in between the beats, the healthier your autonomic nervous system is. So the greater the variability, the greater the HRV score, the more ready you are to train. And so this is kind of a cool little I mean, it's a bit geeky, and okay, you have to buy a heart rate monitor strap and all that kind of stuff, but it's kind of a cool hack. You know, you can look at your heart rate variability and then know whether today is like a good day to go hard, or whether it maybe would be a better day for you to just go take a walk or do some yoga or something.
Yeah, we had a client that we tried to get on that heart rate variability because he was just this hard charger regardless of how he felt. It was just mind over matter type deal. And then what he ended up doing is just like his idea of green, yellow, and red were just always go hard.
Right.
So we just couldn't wrangle him in, and we ended up having to kind of trick him a little bit with the programming we provided, and put together some combos and some movement types that you just can't go hard and can't go fast on, just to kind of try to self-regulate and anticipate that heart rate variability based off the training schedule and this guy's work schedule. So no, it's pretty interesting stuff. It's just some people, you know, Chris, I'm a computer science undergrad as well.
Oh, cool.
And you know, for me to, you know, crush a spreadsheet, track 2, 3, 4 months of progress on like, you know, a number of variables isn't scary to me. But for someone to look at that much information and who's perhaps a different type of thinker is just like, what do you mean I have to track my heart rate and chart it? And, you know, they get a little intimidated.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's definitely different types of people. It's one of the things I've been learning over the last couple of years, you know, that some people respond really well to data and to rules, and other people just, they want to run a mile whenever you say something like that. And it's the talent, the key is to like spot which person is going to respond well. But the reason I like Elite HRV is there's a dashboard, so you as a coach can actually get all of your clients to be tracking their heart rate variability, and then you can sit down and look at one web page, one dashboard, and like see the numbers for like all of your clients, right? So for your clients, they don't even have to care about it too much. Like they just sit down, they know they have to put the heart rate monitor on for a couple of minutes, and then the app has this really nice breathing guide that I really like, and it's just a circle that it spans and then shrinks again, and you just breathe, you time your breathing according to the movement of the circle. And so it's just starting the day with some deep breathing exercises, which I think is probably a good idea anyway. And then you as a coach, you can see exactly what's going on with your athletes, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's a pretty cool hack, I think.
Yeah, it's the way technology is influencing our ability to train and work with athletes, or just be a weekend warrior is amazing, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so, and then when you get into the biochemistry, it's the only way in which I've been able to improve my performance over the last few years is through tweaking the biochemistry. So I'll give you a couple of examples. On the organic acids test, there's 3 markers called adipate, suberate, and ethylmalonate, and those build up in the urine when there's insufficient carnitine in order to enable fat burning, right? So a fatty acid, it can't get from the outside of the cell into the mitochondria where it's burnt as energy, and you need this nutrient carnitine, which can come from your food and also comes from inside your body. You can synthesize it inside of your body. And if there's not enough and you're eating a high-fat diet, then you're not going to feel good because you have not enough of this nutrient to burn the fat. And testing for this with the organic acids and figuring this thing out was like night and day to me. I was eating this high-fat diet, not really doing very well on the bike, did the urinary organic acids test, figured out I was deficient in carnitine, and it just made such a huge difference to me. And it kind of, you think about that, really, I mean, like that technology to be able to do that type of test and for it to be commercially available, not just available to someone like Ken Ford who's working in a lab somewhere, but actually to you and me, I think is a pretty amazing thing. And it's a fairly recent development, I think.
Chris, we know there's a difference between an endurance and a power athlete's mitochondrial density. Have you seen one, if you've worked with any power athletes, an endurance difference between heart rate variability between those two different athletes?
Yeah, so I know that so the heart rate variability score can sometimes come out the same, but typically what I see is the strength athletes, they tend to be sympathetic dominant, right? So that the sympathetic autonomic nervous system being the fight or flight side, and so they tend to be very dominant towards that side. And then the endurance athletes like me, we tend to be very parasympathetic dominant. So with the parasympathetic, you see like the kind of the rest and relax, and you quite often see a very suppressed resting heart rate, right? So my resting heart rate, if I do 3 days of riding my bike for 3 hours, I'll see my resting heart rate drop into the 30s quite often. But yeah, no, that doesn't really speak to how ready to train you are, right? Like a kind of, you just notice those patterns in the heart rate variability.
So Chris, this is all fascinating stuff, man, and I think we're getting about that time to start wrapping up. So if there's got to be, just based off of the 3 or 4 listeners that follow our podcast, one of those guys has to be exhibiting some of these signs of just, why the fuck? Where's my motor? Where's my drive? And perhaps this has sparked a fire under their ass to come check out what you got to offer. What's their next steps? What do they do to get in touch with you? And is there a site or anything you want to pass along to these guys? Where can they find you?
Sure. Actually, I'm running a program at the moment. So I'm calling this idea clinical coaching. So this is the idea that we're going to use these same clinical tests in order to improve your performance. So it's a kind of a different goal from what the doctor's doing. The doctor's just trying to prevent disease and death, whereas we're actually trying to improve your performance. And I say we because I'm partnered with Tommy Wood, the medical doctor, and he's an expert in neonatal brain metabolism. If you want someone to talk about ketones or insulin resistance, he'd be a really great person for the podcast, actually. But we've got together and we're running this clinical coaching program, and it consists of a blood chemistry and the urinary organic acids test that I've been talking about. And you can order that on my website. The address is O2 Boost. That's O2 as in oxygen, boost, and then .nourishbalancethrive.com. And there's some options there. You don't have to do the organic acids if you don't want to. It's more expensive to do them and you have more information, but it's not required. And then what happens is I'll send you a PDF requisition form for LabCorp, and you go to the lab, you get some blood drawn, results come back to us electronically. I sit down with Tommy, we look at your results, we look for things, look for places where you could be doing better, and then I get you back on the phone or Skype, and we discuss what to do next. And that's a great place to start. You know, those are the two most general tests: blood chemistry, urinary organic acids. Very general tests, give you lots of information, and that's a really good place to start to know where to go next.
Well, man, this has been an awesome podcast and pretty insightful stuff. I appreciate your time, Chris. Guys, you got anything else for Chris?
I'm good, Luke.
Nope.
All right, man. Hey, Chris, thanks a lot, man. And we'll be in touch, and maybe we'll try and circle back and get both of you guys on the podcast and talk a little bit about that ketosis and ketones.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased for the opportunity. It's very, very kind of you. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. To learn more about Chris Kelly, the mountain biking entrepreneur, science nerd, and wellness master, visit www.nourishbalancethrive.com. You can also find him on Instagram at, you guessed it, Nourish Balance Thrive. You know, we're always trying to find new ways to use your body to its full potential, so take a peek at the site and take advantage of all the available resources that Chris has to offer. Until next time, bye!